Hello everyone, peace be upon you. Before we begin, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, and stay with me until the end of the story. Also, leave a comment telling me which city and country you're watching from. I'd love to see how far my story has reached. For those of you who have already subscribed, I sincerely wish you good health, ease in all your affairs, abundant blessings, and may all your hopes and dreams come true. Amen. Now, let's begin the story. Dawn slid over Naval Amphibious Base windward in a pale strip of light, the kind that made metal look colder and concrete feel harder. Jordan Reeve stepped out of the Humvee with her gear cinched tight, boots landing on gravel that popped underfoot. The Atlantic air tasted clean and salty. She kept her chin level and her eyes steady as she walked toward the armory. Doors clanged somewhere up ahead. Voices carried. Laughter did too, the easy kind that comes from men who have seen enough to think nothing can surprise them. Inside, the armory smelled like oil and steel. Racks of M4s, sidearms, and machine guns lined the walls. A couple fans hummed overhead, pushing air that never lost the hint of solvent. Jordan signed in, slid her card back, and moved to a bench like she'd been doing it her whole life. She set down her rifle, stripped and checked it with calm hands. Barrel, chamber, bolt. Magazine springs. Nothing rushed. Nothing wasted. She felt the looks before she met them. Hanlon leaned on a table, tablet under his elbow, whispering to King. Keller glanced up, unreadable as always. Doyle stood near the rack with his helmet hooked to two fingers, face flat, eyes sharp. No one said welcome. No one had to. This place spoke in results. Jordan threaded a cleaning patch, watched it come out clean, and seated the bolt with a precise click. A snort drifted from somewhere behind her. Hope she brought a manual, Hanlon said, not loud, not soft. King didn't laugh, just stretched his shoulders and looked away. Keller pretended to catalog med kits. Doyle checked the clock. Jordan didn't answer. She didn't even look up. She'd spent 2 years grinding for this, ocean swims in winter water, timed runs with sand still in her mouth, drown-proofing until the world narrowed to a rope and a heartbeat. Mockery was background noise. The mission was the only voice that mattered. Reeve, Doyle said, finally. We're running a short course this morning. Movement and accuracy. Then team drills. His tone was neutral, his eyes not. Be at your lane in 5. Copy, she said. She slung the rifle, clipped her sidearm, and stepped back into the morning. Wind pushed across the parade deck, bringing gulls and salt and the metallic rattle of target stands being set. The range crew moved fast. Fresh paper. Fresh paint. A whistle shrilled somewhere and cut off quick. Jordan rolled her shoulders, loosened her hands, and mapped the course without moving. Barricade left, corridor cones, steel plate staggered, a final box for transition. Hanlon strolled past with his headset half on. Try not to jam up the line, he said, just loud enough. Jordan let it go. King followed, eyes forward, breacher kit riding high. Keller gave a small nod as he passed, like a medic checking a pulse and finding it steady. Doyle moved last, a study in habit and authority, the one man on the deck who could turn the whole place with a single word. Jordan planted at lane 3. She took in her sight picture, then the periphery, the shadows thrown by the barricade, the gravel lip where a boot could catch, the wind that might lift dust into a half-second blink. She breathed in, breathed out, and let her heartbeat settle to a quiet metronome. Somewhere behind her, someone muttered about firsts and protocol. She didn't catalog the voices. She cataloged the course. Shooter ready, the range control called. Jordan set her stance. Ready. Stand by. Time thin to a clean line. No past. No later. Just the next rep, the next corner, the next sight picture. She could feel Virginia in her bones, the cold dawns, the long runs, the nights she'd stood on the cliff above the water and decided, again, that quitting wasn't part of her DNA. She could feel every hour she'd put in when no one was watching. The armory. The pool. The grinder. The quiet. The buzzer waited in the air like a weight about to drop. She locked her wrists, set her cheek weld, and listened as the bass woke, truck doors, a barked order, a distant anthem test. She didn't need anyone to believe in her. She only needed to do the work, one clean rep at a time. The buzzer hadn't sounded yet. But the line was drawn. The lane was hers. And the only thing left to do was move. The buzzer hit and Jordan broke from the line like a switch had been thrown. 2 shots center on paper, clean. Slide left behind the barricade, lean, 2 more on steel, the ping crisp in the morning air. Transition to a tight corridor of cones, muzzle level, feet light, elbows in. She didn't sprint. She flowed. Every corner was a check, every window a measured breath. She dropped to a knee at the last cone, took the low plate, rose for the high, and drove to the final box without burning a step. The timer barked at the last pair. She holstered on a locked slide and raised a hand. Clear. Range control called the time. Heads turned. Hanlon's smirk flattened. King's eyebrows ticked up. Keller checked his watch like the number needed a second source. Doyle didn't move, but the set of his shoulders changed. Jordan stepped back, reloaded calmly, and let the deck noise return. She hadn't come to win applause. She'd come to remove doubt with data. Hanlon took lane 2 next. He pushed speed, clipped a cone, yanked a shot off steel, and had to send a makeup that cost him a half second he couldn't afford. Clear. His time landed behind hers, not by much, but enough for the whisper to start. King ran heavy and efficient. Keller ran smooth and quiet, a medic who understood that panic kills. Doyle closed the string, textbook clean, the kind of run instructors point to. He still finished a breath behind Jordan's time. No one cheered. The conflict wasn't volume, it was gravity. Jordan could feel it in how the jokes stopped, how the conversations thinned, how the space around her got defined by sidelong looks. Hanlon tugged off his headset. "Nice lap," he said, like he was conceding a coin toss. "Let's see if it holds when the course is moving." Doyle cut in. "Reset for team rotation. Live CQC, variable targets." He didn't look at Jordan when he added, "No coaching from the rails. Run what's called." They built a plywood maze in 10 minutes, narrow halls, offset doors, paper hostels mixed with no-shoot silhouettes. Lights dropped. A strobe panel in the ceiling hit irregular flashes. The range boss clipped a camera to the lead shooter's plate. Doyle pointed. Reeve on point. Hanlon second. King third. Keller trail. Hanlon blew air through his teeth but lined up behind her. Jordan set her muzzle at the door seam and counted the cadence of the strobe. She pushed on a dark beat, sliced the first corner, and drove the barrel into the room like a needle finding a vein. 2 paper threats up, 1 no-shoot hugging a hostage outline. She feathered the trigger twice, then dragged the muzzle to the second target and pressed clean. Left clear. Hanlon slid past on the call and almost stepped into a low dummy wired with noisemakers. She caught his sleeve and yanked him an inch outside the trigger line. He bristled, then saw the wire and pretended he'd planned the pause. Moving. The maze tightened. A door banged on a spring. King absorbed it with a shoulder and anchored the threshold while Jordan cleared a dead space. Keller tagged a no-shoot with a laser and murmured, "Blue," a medic's habit of naming the mistake before it happened. They hit the final hall with the strobe firing so fast it felt like a bad dream. Jordan's rifle locked back 1 target early. She didn't flinch, sidearm out, 1 press, reset, holster. Last room. She booted the hinge, took a hard slice, and froze for half a beat. The layout was a trap: 2 high hostels, 1 low, a hostage center frame, offset mirror behind to throw glare. She broke high left, high right, dipped for the low, and held off the hostage shoulder by a thumb's width. Clear. The buzzer died. The room echoed with their breathing. Range control called the time. Faster than the board. Faster than Doyle's last posted record in the maze. Someone muttered, "Come on," like the clock had personal bias. Hanlon's laugh didn't land. King scratched his jaw and didn't say anything. Keller gave a small, clean nod. Doyle walked the lane once, eyes on tape lines and brass. He stopped at the last doorway and looked at Jordan like he was measuring not just the run but the pattern. Debrief in 5. They circled a whiteboard. The range boss rolled back the camera footage. In the glow of the monitor, the run looked cooler than it felt: short arcs, clear calls, no wasted footwork. Hanlon tried a joke about sleeves and wires. No one bit. Doyle tapped the screen. "This saves ankles," he said, flat. Then he turned to Jordan. "Good work. It should have ended there, a clean file to the day." It didn't. The whisper traveled faster than the footage. By lunch the armory felt tighter, like the air had picked a side. A rumor crawled that the course had been set to favor her height. Another said the strobe timing was off for the other lanes. Someone mentioned optics and press like they were explaining physics. Jordan ate standing, not hungry, and kept her eyes on the board where afternoon drills were posted. At 1300 a runner from Ops brought a folder to Doyle. He read it once, again, then lifted his chin. Briefing in 10. Pack your kits. The deck shifted from practice to purpose. Helmets came out. Radios snapped in. The screen in the briefing room lit with a coastline map and a name stamped across the top: Iron Current. Intel spilled fast: smuggling routes feeding heavier problems, a compound outside Berbera, windows of movement short and ugly. The tasking was clear enough: recon in force, capture if green, exfil before the hive wakes. Assignments ticked across the screen. Doyle ran point. Jordan took forward element coordination and breach timing. Hanlon on comms, King on tools, Keller on casualty collection. When the lights came up, no one cracked wise. The conflict had new teeth. Jordan could feel it in the way Hanlon avoided her eye, in how King started to say something and let it die, in how Doyle rested a hand on the folder like weight meant control. The maze, the times, the whispers, none of it would matter in 6 hours if they couldn't make the beach, cut the wire, and get everyone back on a bird. Back at her locker, Jordan checked her plates, tightened straps, and laid out magazines until the rows looked like a promise. She racked her rifle once, listened to the clean metal talk, and pictured the map again. Coast. Track. Outer wall. Inner rooms. She thought of the morning's buzzer, how the whole world had shrunk to a single command. And as engines spooled somewhere beyond the hangar, the same command surfaced again, quiet and absolute: move. Engines thundered to life, rotors chopping the dusk as the team loaded with the rhythm of men who knew the cost of hesitation. Jordan clipped her radio, checked her carabiners, and followed Doyle onto the bird. No speeches. No nods. The Atlantic air at windward gave way to heat and grit hours later, the dark line of the Somali coast rising out of a moon-washed sea. They fast-roped to a low ridge inland of Berbera, then cut to the beach where the Zodiacs waited under a blackout tarp. Hanlon murmured a comms check. King counted charges under his breath. Keller secured the aid bag like it was a life raft. Surf hammered the rubber hull as they punched through chop. The shoreline showed nothing and everything: a few dead palms, a rusted drum, a dog's bark carried too far on night air. Jordan steered by star slivers and a dim loom from the compound farther down the coast. 2 minutes, Doyle said, barely above the engine's growl. Jordan tasted salt and sand. She pictured the route again: driftwood gully, scrub line, low wall, breach point at the blind corner. A wave stood up without warning and slapped them sideways. The Zodiac bucked. Hanlon pitched, caught a line, lost his tablet to the black water with a curse. Keller grabbed him by the vest and yanked him back in. King's case rattled, one latch popped and Jordan slammed it shut with her forearm. "All good," King said, breath tight. The beach took them hard. They hauled the boat above the wash, then melted into the scrub. Jordan raised a fist and the file stopped. She pointed, 2 sentries on a lazy loop outside the outer wall, rifles slung like props. On her signal, they timed the turn, crossed the gap, and hugged the mud brick. Hanlon whispered, "Window right." Jordan peered. A hanging bulb pulsed weak across a room stacked with crates. She caught labels in a stutter of light, car parts on paper, not car parts inside. Iron current wasn't rumor. They slid to the blind corner. Doyle tapped King. Quiet pop. King set a small charge in the mortar seam and breathed with the wall. A soft cough, a breath of dust, a hole big enough for a shoulder. Jordan went first. She cut the pie, took a low slice that showed empty floor, then eased in. The first room smelled like oil and stale cigarettes. Second room held a sleeping guard with boots still on. King covered while Jordan pressed a hand over the man's mouth and short-choked him out. They stashed him behind drums and moved. Halfway through the inner hall, comms fuzzed. Hanlon slapped his headset. "I'm losing," the rest went to static. Doyle held up 2 fingers, "Push to the rendezvous, stay dark." Jordan swept left into a storage bay and froze. A kid, maybe 12, sat on a crate with a radio and a cheap phone, eyes round, shoes too big. He saw them and inhaled to scream. Jordan shook her head once and brought a finger to her lips. The kid's breath stuttered. A beat. 2. He didn't scream. Jordan eased by, filed the face, filed the choice. At the inner door, a sudden clatter of metal and a curse exploded across the hall. Not theirs. A backroom card game turned alarm. Boots scraped. A rifle scraped concrete. Doyle pointed up and right. Jordan took the high line on a stack of tires, King took low, Hanlon anchored the door, Keller drifted to a crosscover. First shooter rushed the frame and ate 2 rounds before he knew the geometry. Second ducked, fired blind. Plaster chipped Jordan's cheek. She held, waited for the rhythm of his reload, then cut the angle and pressed. He folded. A whistle shrieked from the yard. Flood snapped to life, bleaching the bay in hard light. "They're awake," Hanlon said, too calm to be calm. "We're split on bands. I've got local only." Doyle signaled a pivot to Objective 2, small intel room on the compound map, then out. They would not win a gunfight against the hive. They bounded across the yard, hugging shadow pools between overbright bulbs. A truck coughed near the gate, men shouted in a language Jordan didn't need to translate to understand, "Fan out, find them." She hit the intel door on a shoulder and felt the cheap would surrender. Inside, a metal desk, a safe bolted to the floor, 3 phones, a cork board with shipping routes sketched in pencil and thread. Hanlon snapped photos. Jordan yanked drawers, found a ledger with names and numbers and a stamped logo she didn't recognize. She stuffed it in her plate carrier. Then the night tilted. Shots cracked from the south wall, short, panicked, not theirs. Keller swung to the window. "Civilian down," he said, voice flat. 2 by the alley. 1 moving. 1 not. It was the kid from the crate, crumpled next to a drum. A guard stood over him with a rifle and a bored expression like the noise annoyed him. Jordan felt heat spike in the back of her neck. Doyle's jaw set. The mission didn't include rescues. The mission also didn't include watching a kid bleed out 10 meters away. "Options," Doyle said. "Diversion," Jordan answered. "Take the gate lights, push them north. We peel south, grab the kid, exfil on the beach. King. I can drop the grid for 30 seconds, King said. Maybe 40 if the box is junk. Hanlon shook his head. We lose the grid, we lose our breadcrumbs. I'm blind already. We're blind either way, Jordan said. 30 is enough. Doyle looked at the door, the board, the kid, the mess of it all. He didn't blink long. Do it. King ran a cable to a breaker box and tucked a charge like a magician palming a coin. Jordan braced at the alley door, eyes on the guard's shadow stretching thin across the ground. Keller set his kit 2 steps back and rolled his shoulders once. Hanlon cursed the dead tablet under his breath and kept taking pictures like evidence could outrun fate. The lights died like a throat cut. Noise surged, confused. Jordan was already moving, low and fast, counting the steps to the kid. The guard swung toward motion, she took the shot before his muzzle found elevation. He fell into the drum. Keller slid past her and landed on his knees, hands already deep in bandage and pressure and breath. Stay with me, he said to the boy like he knew him. Boots thudded hard on concrete behind the next corner. Jordan planted at the mouth of the alley and became a wall. 30 seconds, King hissed over dark comms. Then make it 25, Jordan said, eyes on the corner, pulse steady, rifle sure. The grid would come back. The yard would erupt. The beach felt very far away. And for the first time tonight, the mission felt like it was choosing its own path, and it was dragging them with it. The alley narrowed into a throat and Jordan held the mouth with the hard calm she trained for. The grid was still dead. Men shouted in the yard, blind, angry, firing wild at ghosts. Keller worked the kid with both hands, pressure and seal, lips counting breaths. King whispered a ticking count from the breaker, every number a step toward lights and pain. Hanlon stood over the intel bundle like a linebacker over a ball, headset useless, eyes cutting for angles. Doyle watched both ends, jaw tight, weighing seconds like currency. 20, King hissed. Copy, Jordan said. She leaned left, caught a shadow, and clipped it before it rounded the corner. Metal screamed as a drum toppled. Another set of boots skidded in and tried to spray low. Jordan dropped flat, let rounds crack over her back, and answered with 2 fast presses that erased the mistake. She popped up, checked high, then reset on the mouth. How's he doing? Breathing, Keller said. But I need out of here. 15, King said. On my go, Doyle told them. North side decoy, then break south. Hanlon pointed at the only cover in the open yard, a junked pickup nose into the wall. We'll get cut to pieces if we go straight. Then don't go straight, Jordan said. She traced the route in the air. Hanlon, smoke the gate. King, pop the breaker and throw a second at the generator. Keller, on me with the kid. Doyle, take the truck and punch the horn. Make them look at you. Doyle looked at her. Not a challenge. A measure. He nodded once. Do it. 10, King said. Lights in 3, 2, the compound snapped back to life, blinding for a beat. The shouts sharpened. A horn suddenly blared as Doyle slammed his palm on the truck's switch and kicked the door open. The whale drew eyes and muzzles like a magnet. Hanlon lobbed smoke at the gate, gray sheets rolled and ate the sightlines. King's second charge coughed at the generator, dropping half the lamps again, not full dark, but broken enough. Move, Jordan said, and they did. She carried the kid across her chest, Keller matching her step with a hand on the bandage, guiding how she lifted so the seal held. Rounds sparked off concrete near their feet. She didn't sprint. She managed speed and shape like a problem set. Hanlon cut left, barking that the gate was blocked, then found them a narrow drainage run under a fence panel. King slid on his side and shouldered the panel up 2 inches more. Doyle kept the horn howling, then let it drop and joined at the rear with a burst that bought them a breath. They belly-crawled the run. Rust and sand scraped vests. The kid whimpered once. Almost there, Keller told him, steady like a metronome. A guard landed at the fence line and tried to angle a shot through the mesh. Jordan pulled the sling tight, rolled her shoulder to wedge the boy under her plate, and fired through the cutouts. The guard reeled back. They cleared the panel and ate open ground. The beach smelled like diesel and tide. The Zodiac lay where they'd left it, black on black water. But voices were on the ridge, and flashlights licked the scrub from 2 directions. "We're hot," Hanlon said, stating what no one needed to hear. "North Team, 3. South, 2. Load," Doyle ordered. King and Hanlon shoved the bow into the wash. Jordan splashed thigh-deep and lifted the kid in. Keller climbed after, still sealing the wound. Doyle stepped in last and took rear security. Tracers stitched across the sand behind them. The engine coughed twice and then caught. The boat spun, nose to surf, and Jordan dropped to a knee on the bow tube, rifle over water, sighting on pockets of movement. She shot when she had to and held when she didn't. Fuel is finite. Time is finite. Ammo is finite. She treated all 3 like blood. The first wave hit sideways and nearly rolled them. King leaned into the tube and roared at physics. Hanlon white-knuckled the tiller and kept the bow pointed where sky met black water. Doyle fired slow and ugly from the stern, buying silence in short pieces. The second wave carried them up and almost set them down on a buried reef. Jordan braced, ate the jolt in her knees, and stayed up. Then a new sound knifed the air, a boat motor from down coast, harder, higher, closing fast. Not theirs. Hanlon looked left. "Skiff," he said. 2, maybe 3 on board. "Lights off." "Range?" Doyle asked. "Too close to ignore," Jordan said. "King," Doyle snapped. "On it," King said, already unrolling a small launcher from under the bench. He slapped a flare into the pocket and waited for Jordan's count. "Now," she said. King lofted the flare high and ugly. It popped and hung like a small sun. The skiff glowed in harsh red, 3 men hunched and confused, one lifting a rifle, one grabbing the tiller to veer. Jordan took the shooter first. Doyle chewed the bowman. The skiff jerked to a stop in its own wake, turned sideways to the chop, and slammed bow first into an unkind wave. It vanished behind a curtain of spray. When the sheet fell, the boat was wobbling, still moving, but not fast. "Go," Jordan told Hanlon. He did. They ran the swell line until the compound was a smear of bad decisions on the coast. Keller kept a hand on the kid's chest and stared at the numbers he could feel but not see. "He needs light," he said. 10 more minutes, Doyle answered. "You'll get a helicopter's worth." Hanlon angled to the rendezvous. The IR strobe they'd planned to flag with was gone with the tablet. Jordan dug into her carrier and came up with a chem stick, cracked it, and cupped it low so only the right eyes might see. The sea calmed by degrees. Radios found each other again, a pop and then a voice. "Iron current, this is Angel 3. Like me." Jordan raised the stick and counted 2 beats. "Angel 3, mark up." The hello rose out of the horizon like a promise. Rotor wash slapped the water, then the boat. A swimmer team splashed off the side and took the bow line. Hands found the kid and passed him like glass. Keller went with him, eyes locked, orders curt and calm. King heaved the kid up. Hanlon killed the motor and fell back on the tube, breath shallow and laughing once with leftover adrenaline. Doyle stood and scanned the dark for anything that still had a vote. Jordan stayed on the bow and watched the shoreline. The horn, the smoke, the fence, the kid. The ledger thumped once in her plate, a small weight with long teeth. She looked at Doyle and he looked back, the measure had changed. He didn't say it. He didn't have to. Mount up, he finally said. We're done here. They weren't. Not really. The board back at Windward would light with routes and names from that ledger. The whispers on base would bend in new ways after tonight. And the kid on the litter would decide the only part of the story that mattered to Jordan in this hour, whether he opened his eyes again. The hello pulled them into the noisy bright. The sea fell away. The compound shrank to a bad dream. And somewhere between water and sky, the weight of what they'd chosen set in, clean, heavy, and theirs. That was the feeling that rode back with them, a weight that didn't crush so much as insist. The hello's cabin roared around Jordan while she watched Keller work under the crew chief's light, gloved hands steady, voice low and reassuring. The kid's chest rose in thin, stubborn pulls. Doyle stood braced against the bay, eyes on horizon, not on her, but every so often they drifted to the litter like gravity tugged them. Hanlon stared at his empty tablet slot and exhaled through his nose, already rewriting the loss into next time. King checked his cases a third time and finally set one palm flat on the lid, a quiet ritual only he understood. Windward met them with floodlights and clipped orders. The litter rolled to medical. Keller jogged beside it without looking back. Jordan stepped off last and felt the hangar floor like something safe and undeserved. Ops hustled them straight into debrief, salt still on their sleeves, smoke in their hair, a ledger hard in Jordan's plate like a beating heart. The screen lit the room with narrow truths, routes and times, photos Hanlon had salvaged, King's grid cut recorded by helmet cam, Doyle's sparse narration stitching it into a shape command could use. The questions came fast. Why the diversion? Why the civilian assist? Why not hold for a cleaner exfil? Doyle answered without apology. We didn't have clean, he said. We had now. He let the silence carry the rest. Jordan laid the ledger on the table. The room leaned in. Names and numbers, some thin, some bold, a logo no one recognized at first. Intel snapped photos and started whispering in their own language, that shorthand of patterns and past mistakes. A major nodded once, small and final. You brought back more than a fight, he said, and that was the closest anyone got to praise. They were released to gear down. Water. Soap. Quiet. Jordan scrubbed the grit off and watched the drain take it, a small flood of the night leaving her skin. In the mirror, a thin line of dried blood traced her cheekbone where plaster had kissed her. She didn't touch it. Back in the bay, Hanlon tossed a rag at her boots and smirked without heat. Next time the tablet goes overboard, I'm diving, he said. King grunted. Next time I'm zip-tying it to your vest. The banter had edges again, but the edges weren't aimed at her. Doyle found her where the light thinned near the doors. He held a coffee he hadn't sipped and looked like a man measuring 3 problems and 1 answer. You made a call, he said. You were right. No build-up. No lecture. Prejudice didn't evaporate. It refiled itself under, proven. She nodded once. We made the call. His mouth moved like he might argue, then didn't. Keller's still in medical, he said instead. They went. The corridor smelled like antiseptic and quiet relief. Keller stood in the doorway with his sleeves pushed up, face tired but content in that bone-deep way medics get when the numbers swing their way. He's stable, he said. Lost blood. Shock. But we got him turned. Jordan let her shoulders drop a notch she hadn't known she'd held. The kid was asleep under a warm blanket, a line beeping a slow, stubborn rhythm. Even sedated, his brow looked less pinched. She didn't know his name. She knew he'd had a radio and a cheap phone and a choice he didn't take to scream. That was enough for now. Morning bled into base business. The board and ops filled with pins where the ledger reached. A shipping company no one trusted. A warehouse stateside flagged for inspection. Names that had once felt like rumor gaining addresses and schedules. Command carved iron current into phases, some of them visible to this room, most of them not. What mattered to the team was simpler: the next tasking would hinge on what they'd pried out of that compound, and the story about Jordan being fast on a range course had new company, the story about a call in an alley with a kid and a clock. Whispers change flavor when outcomes are clear. The armory didn't go quiet so much as it got specific. King walked by her bench and thumped her shoulder with the back of his hand, casual, private. Hanlon asked for her angles on a new maze layout, then pretended he'd already thought of them. Keller left an energy bar on her kit with a note nobody saw him write, "For when the grid goes dark." Doyle's respect didn't turn into sunshine. It turned into inclusion. She found her name next to his on planning screens, not as a coincidence but as a choice. She took 10 minutes at the cliffs that evening, the Atlantic throwing white at the rocks like it had an opinion. The wind cut clean. The bass behind her worked and jogged and shouted. The weight from the Hello ride was still there, but different now, less about what they'd taken on, more about what they'd earned. The ledger had teeth. The kid had a chance. The team had a seam where new trust could grow. Not perfect. Not permanent. Real. Back in the armory, she cleaned her rifle slow, the ritual that puts a day in order. She ran a patch, listened to the click, watched oil catch light on steel. Doyle drifted by, not hovering, just present. "We brief at 0900, he said. Follow-on looks, wide. She nodded. "Then we narrow it." He almost smiled. "Then we narrow it." When the lights snapped off for the night cycle, Jordan sat on the bench another minute. Somewhere, a major was building a larger map. Somewhere, a boy slept through the worst part. Somewhere, a rumor about height and strobes had already died on the vine. She wasn't here to win arguments. She was here to put one foot in front of the other until the map said stop. The resolution didn't feel like an end. It felt like a stable platform, hammered together by a messy choice and a clean outcome. She stood, stowed her kit, and let the armory door close on a room that finally sounded like work instead of doubt. Morning arrived with a gray edge, and windward moved like a machine that knew its job. Jordan joined Doyle at the briefing table where the ledger had multiplied into slides, routes, faces, warehouses, shell companies. Iron current had unspooled all the way home. The tasking wasn't flashy: a stateside assist with federal partners, quiet and surgical, dismantle a node in Norfolk that fed money and parts back across the ocean. No news cameras. No patches. Just boxes, locks, and men who thought distance made them safe. They rolled out in plain trucks with plain plates, body armor under jackets, rifles cased. Hanlon sat behind a screen again, a new tablet tethered to him like a second lung. King held a toolkit that could open anything that pretended to be closed. Keller rode shotgun with a med pack he probably wouldn't need but carried anyway. Doyle drove the last truck and watched mirrors like they were more honest than people. Jordan read the warrant twice, then pocketed it and let her hands rest. The warehouse didn't look like a villain. Corrugated blue, a faded sign for shipping supplies, 3 loading bays, 1 forklift asleep in a corner. The team moved on a clock that started when the first lock clicked. King worked the door, Hanlon called the net, partners flowed to their lanes, and Jordan took the catwalk to see the shape of the place. Rows of crates. A small office built from drywall on a mezzanine. 2 men near a workbench with the alert posture of people who understand consequences. They saw vests and froze. No shots. No rush. Just eyes and the small choices that decide whether a day turns ugly. "Hands," Jordan said, "level." They complied. Partners cuffed and read. Doyle signaled clear and sent a team to the office. Hanlon found the ledger's twin in a file box, same logo, same handwriting, more names. King pried a crate and revealed innards that did not match the customs label. Keller photographed serials and logged times. It wasn't cinematic. It was correct. Then a door banged somewhere in back. A runner. Doyle cut right and Jordan cut left, converging through wire racks stacked with shrink-wrapped lies. She picked up footsteps on concrete and the scrape of a panic plan falling apart. The man hit a side exit and found it chained by fire code and irony. He spun and threw a wild punch at a future he'd lost. Jordan stepped in, broke his balance with a simple pivot, and pressed him to the door without malice. "It's over," she said. He fought the sentence for one breath, then let it choose him. By noon, the building belonged to forms and photos and phone calls. Jordan stood on the catwalk again and watched labels become evidence become lines on a map that would bend supply chains until nothing illegal moved without shaking. She thought of Berbera's alley, of the horn, of the smoke, of a kid who didn't scream. She thought of the armory and the maze and the rumor that height could change a strobe. When the trucks rolled back through Windward's gate, the base didn't stop to clap. It didn't need to. Respect here came stapled to results. They briefed, they logged, they signed. A commander shook Doyle's hand with the economy of a man who'd seen enough hero stories to care only about endings. He shook Jordan's next and said, "Good judgment," like it was rarer than speed. She nodded and let the words land where doubt used to live. They found Keller in medical that evening, a coffee cooling in his hand and a grin he wasn't trying to hide. "He's awake," he said, meaning the kid. Asked if we were real. Jordan exhaled, surprised by how far the breath went. She stepped into the room and saw bright eyes under gauze and a line of stitches that would tell a small truth for a long time. He looked at her like you look at shore from a boat. "Thank you," he said, voice rough. She shook her head. "You kept quiet," she answered. "You bought us time." He didn't understand the math, not all of it, but he smiled anyway. Night took the base in slow layers. The team drifted to the cliffs because that's where they went when the noise stopped. The Atlantic threw its argument against the rocks and lost, again. Hanlon talked too much about antenna choices until King told him to shut up and he did, laughing. Doyle stood with his hands in his pockets and looked like a man who had changed his mind about something important without needing to say it out loud. Jordan let the wind pick at her sleeves and thought about beginnings that didn't look like beginnings until later. Earlier, she'd believed acceptance would feel like a door swinging open. It turned out to feel like a key left under a mat with a note that said, "Use when ready." The lesson wasn't complicated. You don't argue people into trust. You give them outcomes they can't ignore, and you take responsibility when the line between rules and right gets thin. You learn the weight of decisions you chose and the ones that chose you. You carry both. Before lights out, Jordan walked the armory one more time. The room hummed that low, metallic rhythm she'd heard since the first day, the song of work done right. She ran a cloth over her rifle and watched it shine under the bench lamp. Doyle passed, paused, and tapped the stock with 2 fingers. "See you at 0600, he said. No speech. No test. Just the next rep. She stepped outside and let the door close behind her. Windward stretched out under hard, honest stars. Somewhere, a ledger sat in evidence, turning strangers into warrants. Somewhere, a boy slept without monitors. Somewhere, a rumor about a woman in an armory had become a story about a teammate. Jordan looked toward the water and felt the familiar quiet settle in, a calm that isn't empty but earned. Tomorrow would bring another maze, another map, another choice that would not wait. That was fine. She wasn't here for easy. She was here for the work, the kind that doesn't need cameras or speeches, just a clock, a lane, a team, and the discipline to move when the buzzer sounds. She squared her shoulders, took the stairs down to the deck, and walked toward the early hour that always comes. The base breathed around her like something alive. And for the first time since stepping onto this concrete, she didn't feel like she had to prove she belonged. She felt like she did.